You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies, and today my guests are 10-time Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker Greg Kohs and Emmy Award-winning independent film producer Gary Krieg, and we're going to be talking about their new documentary entitled The Thinking Game. Welcome to the show, Gary and Craig.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So our audience knows. Let's give a brief. If one of you could give a brief synopsis of The Thinking Game, so they'll know what we're talking about when we discuss this wonderful, fascinating film. Gary, do you want to take that over?
What's that?
Who would like to give the brief synopsis?
Oh, Gary, why don't you give the brief synopsis?
Go ahead, Greg. You're on a roll.
The Thinking Game is a feature-length documentary film that tells the inspiring story of a scientist who's on a mission to solve artificial general intelligence, or AGI, and on the way solve some of the greatest scientific problems known to humankind along the way. And so that's the synopsis of the film.
Pretty daunting. Pretty daunting. So how did this film come about, Gary?
Well, I'll start. Greg and I worked on a film in 2016 called AlphaGo, which tracked a group of AI scientists led by Demis Hassabis to create an algorithm that could play the board game Go. And that led to, so that was a feature documentary, 2016, and we were invited back to continue to track the research, but not necessarily for a film. It was going to be just an archive of the research with an unknown output. And we were fascinated by just the subject of AI. We felt there was maybe a little unfinished business with AlphaGo in terms of spoiler, they won the board game, but it wasn't really clear what that might mean in a practical sense of how people might be using AI. So that was another reason for us to want to kind of explore the next chapter. So we were invited back to document everything that was happening with Demis and his team of scientists at DeepMind. And we were fortunate that they actually did something worthy of a follow-up film.
But when you started this film, you were under a great deal of secrecy, I understand from my research, and you were not able really to even tell your family what you were doing. So here you're going over to London. I think this was a 5-year project, and you really couldn't talk to them about that. What was that all about? When you started this, you had no idea that this was going to become a documentary at the time. You were just going to film and see if this is something that should be saved for history books, basically. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. It was an archival endeavor, much like maybe filmmakers would cover a NASA mission or NASA research, not knowing whether that rocket would actually go to the moon or Mars or wherever the intended mission was. So we were just documenting multiple missions within the company, all of them kind of focused and aimed towards trying to solve artificial general intelligence. And yeah, one of the parameters was this was very confidential research, um, and so we talked to each other a lot about what we witnessed and what we documented, but we weren't allowed to share with the public. But as filmmakers, we're storytellers. So as we were filming, we always had story in the back of our minds. So whether that was the story of a 30-minute meeting, there was going to be a beginning, middle, and end to that meeting, and we were looking for an arc to the meeting. As it turns out, our 5-year endeavor, we found an arc to the entire archive that was worthy of a film, and ultimately, in large part due to a breakthrough that we documented during those 5 years that was we thought would be Nobel worthy. And indeed, just a couple months ago, Demis and his fellow scientist John Jumper at DeepMind were awarded the Nobel Prize for the breakthrough that we documented.
And I understand you were hoping this would happen while you were filming, and that you had a secret word that you were using. Instead of using the word Nobel, you were using another word. Gary, what was that word that you were using?
We definitely didn't want to jinx anything. So we referred to any possibility of a Nobel as ABBA. Hopefully, the story would end in Sweden.
I love it. So you named it after the group.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's adorable. I love that. I think that's a great little story there. Demis is really kind of, well, he's a fascinating man. But when he asked you if you could, this is a quote, if you could go back in time and document the Manhattan Project, how would you do it? What were your when he asked you that question? Because that's a big question to ask filmmakers of how they would document it. What did you? And now each one of you can answer this. What did you both feel when and think about when he asked that question? I'll start with you, Greg.
Well, that question was asked while we had not committed to filming the archive. We were invited to following AlphaGo, um, and that was filming an archive. It wasn't to make a film. And as we said, Gary and I are filmmakers. We want to create stories and share them. In this case, there was no guarantee there would be a story that we would capture, create a film, and share it. So we would essentially, for all intents and purposes, be going dark. We would be going and working, filming secret research, and potentially never being able to share it. Maybe our kids or grandkids would see it in the future to see how they got to where they got 10, 15, 20 years from now, technology wise. So in our conversations with Demis, as we considered this invitation, he had asked us that question. And when he asked us that question, we had no idea what was going on at the lab. But when he asked us that question, there was a lot of gravity, a lot of weight to it. And we're like, wow, it's maybe there's something really interesting going on there. And maybe there are parallels. And how fascinating would it be to document a mission of that importance and that weight? So that was my recollection of it. Gary, how about you?
Yeah, it was definitely a heavy moment, and we knew enough about the Manhattan Project to understand that there were world-class scientists assembled in secret with a common goal. And so the parallels of what Demis and his scientists were doing in London really it piqued our curiosity. And AGI, true AGI, will be the most powerful technology humankind's ever created, and that will carry just it's going to change every aspect of society. And so that was exciting. And there's also the heaviness of the possibility of misuse. And so when we were really talking about everything we might learn while creating that archive, it was just too good of an opportunity to want to pass up.
And are you happy that you did decide to do this? I said, are you both happy that you did decide to film this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's so much out there about AI, good and bad, and how it's going to affect our lives. Certainly, there's lots of controversy over it, particularly in the film industry. Last year, when they had the strikes, all about a lot of it was most of it, a good portion of it was about AI and how it's used. And your film doesn't get into that. I mean, it doesn't get into the controversy of good and bad, but it does show all the good that can take place by using this technology. So while you're filming this, they discovered, Demis and his team discovered protein folding, which how many years were people trying to figure this out? I mean, many decades trying to figure it out. And after a tremendous amount of work, they discovered more about protein folding, and you can get into that a little bit more, but that was something that obviously you did not have any idea that was going to happen when you were filming this. So when they did discover this, what was that like for both of you? And again, Greg, I'll start with you, and then Gary, you can answer afterwards.
Yeah, as we followed the different streams of research going on at DeepMind's artificial lab in London, we were exposed to a lot of different streams of research. Some we understood better than others. And once we discovered the AlphaFold team and their mission to solve a 50-year-old grand challenge in biology, science of realizing the structures of proteins, which they call protein folding, and the implications of the benefit to the world of humanity should they solve this problem that thousands of scientists had tried to solve previously. When we realized the benefits of if they did succeed, it was kind of an aha, kind of wow moment, for us, and an exciting moment. So yeah, and then to be in the room when they essentially in the rooms when they did solve it was was goosebumps. And then the decision not to monetize it, but to share it for free with the world for the benefit of humankind was something I'll never forget. It was just a quiet moment that happened where a lot of jaws dropped in the room. And as a result, that breakthrough is as common in a biology lab as a microscope now in its use. So yeah, but how did you feel when we discovered it and when the breakthrough happened, Gary?
Well, it definitely checked the box. It was left unchecked at the end of AlphaGo of, like how is AI going to be used, practical application in a meaningful way. And when we learned about, just how so much scientific research begins once they know the three-dimensional shape of that protein, that's the beginning of it. And they're really difficult to figure out. So if it can be done computationally, if DeepMind could crack it, it would have a profound impact. And so we were excited that we were starting the film project the same time they were starting protein folding. So we got in on the ground floor. And we look back at the early interviews and the early, kind of group huddles with that team. It was not a foregone conclusion that it was going to end in a Nobel Prize. Let's put it that way. It was a very tall mountain to climb.
But somehow you felt they mate because you were manifesting it actually, but you didn't want to jinx it, but you were manifesting it. So you did, you were all hoping there for sure, for sure. I don't know if you can explain this. I mean, because our audience is going to go, what's protein folding? So do you understand it that you can explain it to the audience so they would understand it? How about Greg? Can you tackle that one?
Sure. Well, I'm excited to say that we made a film that explains that with the diagrams and props that I don't have access to right now. That's probably in a wonderful musical score to accompany the lessons. And we really tried to make protein folding, its significance, and why it's important, accessible to a general audience. So rather than me giving you a bunch of scientific terms right now, I would encourage your viewers and watchers, listeners, to watch the film, which will be available on Friday. Plug on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon, and hopefully it'll people will feel really good that they've learned about protein folding and actually understand something that took us a long time to understand. Let's put it that way, and took us a long time and a lot of head scratching to figure out how to make it accessible to a general audience. However, Gary's really good at explaining things. So, I mean, Gary, if you've got an explanation you want to spit out, go for it.
Oh, wow. I thought that was a beautiful dodge and the best way to do it. Yeah, really watch the film to really understand what you need to know about protein folding.
And it is this. I just want to tell everybody. this film is easy to understand. They have that's the challenge I'm sure you both had, is how you take something that's incredibly complicated. It's a 50-year problem people are trying to figure out, and you're trying to digest it and put it in a film, and it's entertaining. And you're right, the music is wonderful, and the graphics and everything else it used in this film is something I think why it's so important, why this film is so important, because I think most people in the world, I would say generally, do not understand AI and what it can do and what it can't do. I mean, we understand some of it, but we don't understand all of it. And so this puts it together, particularly this way, how it can be used for good, how it can help our lives, how it can help illnesses and many other things that, this particular the protein folding can do an awful lot to help society. And the fact that they're offering it to and they're not charging for it, I think that's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Yeah. So, Demis is a very fascinating person on his own, and he was a childhood prodigy and a genius. And you talk about a little bit a Forrest Gump-like quest for knowledge. Let's talk a little bit more about Demis, because this is his passion. This was a 40-year search for him, this quest. So let's talk a little bit more about what he's like and how he was on the on camera actually too. So, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about Demis?
Sure. Gary and I, the more we learned about Demis, following AlphaGo, which Demis was in AlphaGo, our previous film we made together, but we knew very little about him personally and his journey to how he got to where he is today. And the more we learned, the more it was kind of like, it was hard to believe it was nonfiction. It felt fiction. Like, really? This guy went to this university, he studied this, he studied that, he made the most popular video game of his time, and he was 16, or just a very unusual, unexpected, compelling journey that he's had. And so we felt like that as we were filming and learning more about him, we felt, wow, this would be a wonderful narrative on its own. But then to have dual narratives of the AlphaFold mission being realized along with his journey through life was kind of the perfect companion piece to marry those together. But he was fascinating. Yeah. What do you think, Gary?
In terms of filming Demis, he's always on the move, and just tracking trying to keep up with him over the course of a day. He's hopping from meeting to meeting to meeting, and they're wildly different. It's, protein folding to the game of StarCraft to nuclear fusion to weather prediction, on and on and on. And he's got to, just like keep up with experts in all these very, different fields. And so kind of going back to what Greg was talking about on the Forrest Gump, he lived so many chapters before he even got into AI. He's just, uniquely qualified to be an expert in so many different directions. It's really mind-blowing.
During this process, there were many times when there was frustration. I'm sure, some things succeeded, some things didn't, but the team would go into quiet contemplation and focused introspection. And you have said, or what I read was that this was a master class in the art of silence. What did you both learn from that when you were watching this group go into that introspection and silence?
Um, it felt like it started with kind of these unusual pauses when we would go into a meeting and film the meeting. And people would be discussing and debating and about some scientific problem, which we knew very little about what they were talking about, or code or what have you. And then all of a sudden, they'd all stop and no one would speak. They'd all just be thinking and looking off into the ceiling. And it was a bit uncomfortable at first because you're just used to everyone speaking. This person speaks and that person speaks. But everyone was so comfortable with that. And then suddenly, the more we kind of evaluated that and paid attention as we were filming, and we were patient with that, we just kind of we noticed the story of that particular moment, that meeting. We may not have understood the scientific terms they were talking about, but we started to recognize and appreciate the challenges and the incredible amount of energy and thought going into solving these challenges, whatever they may be. And yeah, and it was really interesting, and it's made me rethink conversations since when I'm in a conversation, and that um, have something useful to say, and that moves that's interesting and um, moves the conversation forward or moves us closer to a solution rather than just noise. So yeah, so sometimes it felt like maybe the some of the cleverest people in the room maybe were not the loudest, and that was something that I grew to appreciate. How about you, Gary?
Yeah, all of that. And really the only thing I would maybe add is it took us we would document these moments, and there might be an acorn, in one of those meetings that we wouldn't really see sprout for much further down the line. We'd be going back through the footage and then realize something was said or understand something differently to make us really appreciate the moment in a different way.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about Eric Schmidt. I worked with Eric Schmidt when he was the CEO at Novell. I was a senior manager of communication, and I worked with him directly for a number of years. And he's another brilliant mind. And so let's talk a little bit about him and his involvement with this. Gary, why don't you start?
Yeah, Eric, when Demis needed to scale his company, he was entertaining offers from different companies. And at the time, Eric was running Google, and Eric offered not only the computational resources that Demis was going to need, he also allowed the research to continue without productization. He just said, continue to, search for AGI. And that's pretty unique to kind of knowing how ambitious the project was going to be and how long it might take. But to make that happen really showed that he was kindred spirits with Demis. So he was not only, is not only an authority in the AI space, it's just really foundational to this particular story. So we're really grateful that he was able to participate.
How about for you, Greg?
Yeah, it was interesting when we filmed AlphaGo, our previous film in Seoul. Um, while filming, I filmed this person in the room. I had no idea who he was, and at all. I just knew, oh, he's some bigwig, and he and Demis got along well, and he seemed curious. He was also one of those quiet types that you could tell he was doing a lot of thinking and asking really interesting questions, afterthought. And so now we embark on this film and I learned, maybe Gary knew who he was. And I think you did know exactly who he was, Gary, but I was like, I didn't know. And I'm like, dang, that guy's like Eric Schmidt. He was in Seoul when we filmed in Seoul. He was there and so then we learned Demis's story and we thought, wow, Eric not only was in Seoul and an eyewitness to that important, pivotal kind of Sputnik moment breakthrough that happened in Seoul, with the breakthrough of AlphaGo. But also, Eric, as Gary mentioned, was an eyewitness to the actual acquisition, that Eric and Google had made with DeepMind, and no one was better versed to tell us why that was an important acquisition or the importance of AI today, because Eric has his he has the pulse of the industry and the technology throughout the world in a way very few do. So he provided a nice voice and an important voice in the film.
He does. He is brilliant. No question about it. Where can people see the thinking game?
The Thinky Game is available starting this weekend on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play.
Wonderful, wonderful. People seek it out. The thinking game. It's a very enlightening, fascinating documentary, and you'll come away learning a lot about the topic of right now is AI. Everything you hear and read anymore is about AI. So this will help you understand a little bit more about it. Thank you both for making this wonderful film and making it available. And I look forward to having you back on the show with your next project.
Great. Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, thank you so much.